And we're ready to begin. And so today is April 10th, 2021. And we'll begin with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato
Arahato Samma
samma sambuddhassa.
Sambuddhassa
Namo
Namo
tassa
Tassa
bhagavato
Bhagavato
arahato
Arahato Samma
samma sambuddhassa.
Sambuddhassa.
Okay, I'm muting everybody now so that I'm the only one speaking. Okay, so last week we looked at Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fours, Sutta number 123, which explains the difference between the fate of two types of practitioners, meditators. Those who attain, and the difference is stipulated on the basis of the attainment of the four jhanas. So one is the ordinary person who attains any of the jhanas and then gets reborn someplace in the form realm, depending on the level of the jhanic attainment. And the other person, so one person is the ordinary, unenlightened, uninstructed person, the person who's not a disciple of the Buddha, but through their practice, they're reborn there. And the other is the disciple of the Buddha who practices the jhanas and gets reborn there. And so you can see from this that the attainment of jhana is not something unique to the Buddha's teaching, but it was a practice apparently spread amongst the contemplative communities in India during the Buddha's time. Maybe they didn't label those attainments first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, but they were able to attain the equivalent levels of samadhi or meditative absorption. And so the ordinary person, the non-Buddhist practitioner, what the Chinese call Wai Dao, Wai Daoja. So the one who's outside the Buddha's way is reborn in some place in the form realm. And the Buddha's disciple is also reborn in the same level of the form realm. But the difference is that the outside practitioner remains there for the full lifespan, and then passing away from the form realm, he gets reborn someplace else, and then at some later time might be reborn in the three realms of misery, the hells, the animal realm, the sphere of the pretas, the afflicted spirits. The way the sutta phrases it, it seems as though they go directly from the form realm to the realm of intense suffering. But according to the Abhidharma and commentaries, you don't go from the form realm to the realms of misery, but you come back from the form realm to maybe back to a human rebirth. And then as a human being, one might commit unwholesome karma, and through that one gets reborn in the lower realms. So that is the fate of the ordinary practitioner. But the Buddha's disciple remains there all that life, and on completing the entire lifespan in that realm, the disciple attains final liberation, final nibbana in that very same state of existence. So this difference is described with regard to each of the four jhanic levels. The only difference is the level of rebirth. The sphere of rebirth corresponds to the intensity of the jhanic attainment. Okay, now we're going to get, there are actually four suttas here which form a little group revolving around the same theme, but with just differences in the details. So now we come to the Anguttara Nikaya Sutta 124, Book of Fours 124, which again speaks about four kinds of persons found in the world. Okay, we have the person who attains the first jhana, and then this person contemplates whatever phenomena are found there I want to get the Pali for this. So whatever phenomena are found there that pertain to or belong to or have the characteristics of material form, feeling, perception, the volitional activities, and consciousness. So these are in effect, these are the 5 aggregates. I just put the Pali into a box, but it's very small. How do I increase the size? Okay, anyway, it says, so yadeva tata hoti rupagatang vedanagatang sanyagatang sankaragatam vinyanagatam. So he contemplates these, any phenomena that falls within the 5 aggregates, contemplates them as impermanent, as dukkha, here translated suffering, as a disease, a boil, a dart, as misery, as an affliction, as alien, as disintegrating, as empty, as non-self. I'm going to try to more successfully okay, this is larger. I remember there used to be a way for me to change the font size to make it larger. I don't see that now. Okay, so we have the characteristics in Pali are anicca, which is translated impermanence, dukkha, suffering, roga is a disease, ganda is like a boil or pimple, sometimes translated even a tumor, sala is an arrow, a dot, aga is here translated misery, abada is affliction, parato means as other, as different, here translated alien, and as disintegrating, palokato, breaking up and passing away, and sunyato as empty, and anattato as non-self. Okay, and then the text continues with the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in companionship with the devas of the pure abodes. And we have, okay, before we come to that note, first let us take these 11 terms of contemplation. So these 11 modes or perspectives of contemplation are actually elaborations on the 3 characteristics. So the 3 characteristics are impermanence, dukkha, and non-self. But here we have 11 angles from which one could contemplate these phenomena. And the commentaries explain how these 11 can be comprised under the 3 characteristics. So we have, first let's take, maybe we'll do this as a test. So first we have impermanence as the main heading. So if the other 10 characteristics, which would come under impermanence? And don't look at the note. Can you take a guess? You could unmute yourself if you want to speak.
Is it disintegrating?
Right, exactly. Disintegration is another aspect of impermanence. And it's, in a way, it highlights maybe more distinctly the main feature of impermanence, which doesn't mean simply that things after 10 years or 100 years come to an end, but that even at the present moment when one is contemplating these phenomena with very sharp, precise vision, one sees the things breaking up and perishing from moment to moment. So we have disintegration. And that, according to the commentaries, is the only other term that falls under the heading of impermanence. Then let's take the term non-self. What other modes of contemplation here pertain to non-self? Don't be afraid to speak up.
Is it empty?
And alien,
Okay, we take Div Patel.
empty and alien.
Exactly, right. Yeah, so alien or other, so you're regarding them not as yourself. So that's why they're called alien or other. And then empty means empty of a self or anything belonging to a self. So we have these three represent the characteristic of non-self. Then all of the others are elaborations on the mark of dukkha. Actually, I disagree with the Anguttara commentary. The Anguttara commentary says to empty and non-self belong to the characteristic of non-self. But some other commentaries put the mark of being alien under the characteristic of non-self. Okay, now I want to backtrack and just see what's going on here. Okay, so here we have the meditator attains the jhana, in this case, the first jhana. And then, so at the attainment of the jhana represents the aspect of samatha, that is tranquility or calmness, serenity, samadhi, and then contemplating the phenomena as impermanent and so forth represent the aspect of insight. And what one is contemplating with insight are the five aggregates that are occurring within the jhana itself. And this highlights a distinctive, a very salient difference between the Buddha's approach to the jhana attainments and the approach taken by the non-Buddhist contemplative, the theorists, the non-Buddhist theorists of meditation, the non-Buddhist practitioners and theorists. What happens within the non-Buddhist practitioners, particularly maybe the Vedantic practitioners, the practitioners rooted in the Upanishads or in the yogic systems of meditation, when they attain these stages of deep samadhi, in which thinking and discursive thought settles down and becomes still, and the mind becomes very bright and luminous, they take that to be the appearance or the manifestation of the Atman, the self, or the Purusha, the soul, the Paramatma, the supreme self. And then they grasp upon that experience as being the disclosure of the self. And from the Buddhist standpoint, that represents a kind of fundamental grasping to the notion of self, which becomes a condition for rebirth into a higher realm of existence corresponding to the jhana, but it is still, that experience is still shrouded in ignorance and delusion. And so it's not able to break through and cut off the bonds that tie one to the cycle of repeated birth and death. But what the Buddhist practitioner does, guided by the Dharma, by the teaching of the Buddha, one examines that experience, one withdraws from that experience of deep samadhi, the jhana, and one dissects the jhanic experience by way of the five aggregates. Here, one first looks at the jhanic experience and sees that the jhanic experience arises on the basis of the physical body. So that would be part of the form aggregate. And then within the jhanic experience, there is a feeling. In the case of the first jhana, it would be the sukha vedana, the blissful feeling. There is a perception, the perception of the object of the jhanas. There is various volitional activities, the intention or volition that has brought the mind into jhanic absorption, and the volition to sustain that jhana for a determined period of time. And then there is the consciousness, the underlying awareness of what is taking place within the jhana. So what the Buddha does is to take the jhanic experience. The non-Buddhist ascetic or meditator grasps the jhanic experience as a unitary whole, and therefore identifies it with a permanent, eternal, ever blissful self, Sat Chit Ananda, the permanently existing Chit, aware or conscious, Ananda, blissful, Atman or self. But the Buddha turns back on the jhana and dissects it into a particular constellation, a coming together, an assemblage of the five aggregates. And so this in itself dismisses the idea of unity, the unitary nature of the jhana, that the jhana is composite, constituted by a multiplicity of factors, and those factors can be sorted out and assigned to one or another of the five aggregates. So first comes dissecting the jhana into the five aggregates. And in terms of the system laid out in Visuddhimagga, let me get my note. Yeah, this would correspond to what's called in the Visuddhimagga system, Nama Rupa Paricheda, or also called Nama Rupa Vavatana. So this would be the analysis into mentality, materiality, or the definition, determination by way of mentality, materiality. So one sees that the jhanic experience is comprised of the material phenomena, the body within the state of the jhana, and particularly the heart base, which is, and the nervous system, which is the physical base for the states of consciousness that belong to the jhana. And then the nama aspect, the mentality aspect, would be the 4 mental aggregates. Okay, and then one goes to the next step, and then one contemplates these 5 aggregates by way of the, in general terms, by way of the 3 characteristics: impermanent, dukkha, non-self. But here, as we saw, the 3 characteristics are further subdivided so that we have 11 angles of contemplation, 11 ways to look at the 5 aggregates. And it's said that through this contemplation by way of the 11 angles, with the breakup of the body after death, the meditator is reborn in the pure abodes. Let's look at the note here on the pure abodes. So it says that the pure abodes are 5 planes of existence in the form realm into which only non-returners can be reborn. And non-returners attain arhatship there without ever returning to the lower realms. If you remember, last week we looked at the scheme of the Buddha's cosmos. Do you see it here? The 31 realms of existence?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay. What's interesting is that the pure abodes are considered states that pertain to the 4th jhana. And so we have the 5 pure abodes, from the lowest, the durable realm, to the highest pure abode. So they're said to be states that pertain to the 4th jhana. But here in the sutta, we have a meditator who attains the 1st jhana, and through the 1st jhana is reborn in the pure abodes. So it seems that if one becomes a non-returner, even based on the 1st jhana, one could be reborn in the pure abodes. One doesn't have to attain the 4th jhana to be reborn in the pure abodes. I think last week I said that the non-returners who achieve the 4th jhana are reborn in the pure abodes, but maybe I have to correct that statement. It seems that even a non-returner who masters the 1st jhana can be reborn in the pure abodes. Now, this sutta doesn't specifically say that this meditator becomes a non-returner, but when it says that the meditator is reborn in the pure abodes, this implies that this meditator has become, as a human being, has become a non-returner. And we find support for that in, I took some other suttas. Which are parallel to this one. And okay, we'll look at numbers 64, 52, 64. So here, do you see the Word document with MN 64?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay, so here the Buddha is, this is Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 64. The Buddha is speaking to Ananda about the path for abandoning the 5 lower fetters. So first he says that the meditator, again secluded from sense pleasures, from unwholesome states, enters and dwells in the 1st jhana. And then he says, whatever exists there of material form, feeling, perception, the formations or volitional activities and consciousness, he sees those states as impermanent, suffering, a disease, a tumor, a barb, a calamity, an affliction. In Pali, they're the same terms as in the Anguttara Sutta. as alien, as disintegrating, as empty, as not self. Okay, but now the text goes further than what is said in the Anguttara Nikaya. So having contemplated the jhana in terms of the 5 aggregates, and then by way of the elaborated scheme of the 3 characteristics, he turns his mind away from those states and directs it towards the deathless element. This is, in Pali, this is the amata dhatu. So amata is deathless and dhatu is an element. So he directs the mind towards the deathless element, or focuses the mind on the deathless element. This is peaceful, this is the sublime, that is the stilling of all conditioned formations, the relinquishing of all attachments, the destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. So the mind in this meditative state is first contemplating with insight the 5 aggregates, but then at a certain point, the mind turns away from the 5 aggregates and settles upon and focuses on the deathless element, which is nibbana. And then it continues, if he is steady in that experience, if he's firm in that, focused steadily upon that, then he attains the destruction of the asavas, the taints. That means, in effect, attaining arhatship. But if he does not attain the destruction of the taints because of some desire for the Dhamma, some delight in the Dhamma, then with the destruction of the 5 lower fetters, he becomes one due to reappear, to be reborn spontaneously. And then I put in brackets in the pure abodes, and there attain final nibbana without ever returning from that world. So in the case of some practitioners, those with very sharp wisdom, through this sequence of practices, they can attain arhatship right on the spot. But some practitioners still will have a kind of subtle craving and attachment to this experience. It's not the gross craving, a gross attachment, but a very subtle enjoyment and attachment of that experience. And so that's enough, because they're attached to this sublime experience, they're able to cut off the 5 lower fetters, but the attachment prevents them from cutting off all of the fetters. And so in this case, they become a non-returner who takes rebirth in the pure abodes. And then the commentary explains, and this is a back note, but the commentary takes that Dhamma to be the experience of samatha and vipassana, the calmness of the jhanas and the delightful experience of insight. So they become attached to serenity and insight, and that prevents them from reaching arhatship. But they cut off the 5 lower fetters and take rebirth in the pure abodes. Then there's another sutta along the same lines, but uses a somewhat different way of using insight contemplation. So this is spoken by Venerable Ananda himself to a householder in this Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 52. So Ananda begins by saying, the householder asks, is there a way in which a practitioner, abiding, diligent, ardent, and resolute, can liberate the unliberated mind, destroy the taints, and attain supreme security from bondage. Then Ananda explains that here the practitioner attains the first jhana, and then he reflects back on that jhana and understands it thus. This first jhana is conditioned and volitionally produced. But whatever is conditioned and volitionally produced is impermanent and subject to cessation. Just trying to find the Pali for this. Oops. 52. I keep on jumping past it. And so the Pali goes that this first jhana, the key words here are abhisankatang, which means that it's put together by conditions, and particularly by conditions that originate from the mind. So in a sense, mentally constructed, mentally fabricated. And abhisanchetayitang, which is almost synonymous with this, but it clearly underscores the role of chaitana or volition. As we could see from this participle, so it's based on chaitana, volition. So it's through volition, intention, that one enters into the first jhana, that one cultivates it, constructs it, and enters into it. And then one reflects back that this jhana has come into being through these conditions rooted in the mind, and therefore it's produced or put together through volition. And then one goes to the next contemplation or reflection, that whatever is conditioned and volitionally produced is impermanent and subject to cessation. So because it's put together through conditions generated by the mind, conditions governed by volition or intention, the intention that brought the state into being comes to an end. And when that intention comes to an end, the state produced by intention also comes to an end. So it's impermanent, subject to cessation. And then just based on that observation, if one is steady in that, holds to that insight firmly, then one attains arhatship right on the spot. But if one does not attain the destruction of the taints or asap or the arhatship, again, because of that desire for the Dhamma, that delight in the Dhamma, then the insight itself is strong enough to bring the destruction of the 5 lower fetters and issue in rebirth, spontaneous rebirth in the pure abodes. And there one attains final nibbana without ever coming back to this world. And then the same thing said with regard to the first jhana is said with regard to the higher jhanas. Whoops. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so let's come back now to our sutta. Okay, so here we could see that when it says with the breakup of the body after death, this meditator is reborn in companionship with the devas of the pure abodes. Through this contemplation, what's implied here, but not stated. So what I would actually do is put a kind of note here. Yeah, it would seem to me that everything that's stated in Majjhima Nikaya number 64 should be inserted into this sutta. Yeah, so after contemplating the 5 aggregates in the jhana by way of impermanence, suffering, and so on, then the meditator will turn away from those states and direct the mind towards the deathless element, and then reflecting or seeing the deathless element as peaceful, sublime, and so on. And there one would attain either the destruction of the taints, but here that is not stated. So this is assuming one who doesn't have the strength or the firmness of wisdom to attain the destruction of the taints. So in this case, one doesn't attain the destruction of the taints, but rather with the destruction of the 5 lower fetters, one becomes due to be reborn in the pure abodes. And then once one is reborn in the pure abodes, then one doesn't come back from there, back into any other lower realm of rebirth, but one attains final liberation in the pure abodes itself. So that's why I said that this is a rebirth not shared with worldlings. So worldlings might attain the first jhana and again be reborn in the form realm, not in the pure abodes, but then they will pass away and be reborn elsewhere. Okay, now the same thing will be said in regard to each of the other jhanas. So we don't have to go into the rest in detail since the principle is the same. So all the case with all of the other jhanas will be elaborated in the same way. The only thing that differs are the state of the jhana itself. So at this point, I could ask whether we have any questions based on what we've explored here.
Bhante, can I ask? Is it possible to...
Wait, just let me get the
Right.
participants list. So many windows that have to be moved around. Okay, now I see it. Okay, so who is asking?
Julian?
Okay, you could go, yeah. But the normal way to ask a question is to click the hand.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but go ahead since you started to speak. Might as well go on.
Okay. Bhante, is it possible to not even to go to any of the jhanas and then direct contemplation of the aggregates and then attain to this non-returner?
My guess is that it is possible. So normally within the sutta framework itself, one finds it stated that the practitioner gains one or another of the jhanas, then contemplates the jhana by way of the 3 characteristics or the 11 angles, and then becomes a non-returner. But my guess is that if the insight becomes strong enough, it's possible to achieve the state of non-returner or even arhatship. In fact, my theory or supposition is that the Satipatthana system, taken as an integral whole, you see, the Satipatthana Sutta doesn't speak specifically and expressly about the attainment of jhanas. So my supposition is that the Satipatthana system, taken as an integral whole, can lead to the jhanas, but it's also possible to develop it without entering into the jhanas. And yet it's said at the end of the Satipatthana Sutta that one who practices in this way for a determined period of time will attain either final knowledge, final liberation here and now in this life, or if one doesn't attain final liberation in this life, then one will attain the state of non-returning. So I take the
Okay.
Satipatthana system to be the paradigm, or at least a possible paradigm, for the insight practitioner who doesn't utilize jhana as a basis for insight. Okay, now we'll go to the hands. So we come to Vinyu.
Yes, Bhante, good morning. I have this question regarding 1 to 4. You mentioned about one needs to get into the first jhana, which is Vitakka, Vichara, Vitisukha, Ekagata,
Yeah.
and then you contemplate the 5 aggregates. Under this context, if one is in Ekagata, how would one be able to contemplate on the 5 aggregates?
Actually, that's a very, very good question and a very important question. And this brings us to a division of opinions about the relationship between the jhana attainment and the insight based on the jhana. So the 2 opinions in brief are, one is that one practices insight within the jhana attainment itself and sees, while absorbed in the jhana, one sees the factors of the jhana by way of the 3 characteristics or the 11 angles. So I know some contemporary practitioners advocate that point of view. The classical point of view set out in the Visuddhimagga, the Pali commentaries, is that one enters into the jhana and attains a certain level of mastery over the jhana. But then to do the insight practice, one has to emerge from the jhana to a level of, we call this ordinary or sense sphere consciousness, in which the mind is still imbued with the flavor of the jhana, that is calm, collected, rid of the hindrances, malleable, workable, well-focused, but not absorbed in the jhana itself. And then one uses that flexible, malleable, concentrated mind to reflect back on the jhana experience and examine it by way of the 3 characteristics. So my opinion leans to the commentarial interpretation, because I could see maybe those who say in the first jhana, you could contemplate with insight. I say maybe they have some case because vitakka and vichara, thought and examination, are present in the first jhana. But when you come to the second jhana, where there's no vitakka, vichara, no thought and examination, to my mind, it would be a puzzle. If there's no thought and examination, how do you examine the experience by way of impermanent dukkha, impermanent suffering, as, what are the other terms? As a disease, as a boil, as a dart, as alien, disintegrating, empty, non-self, to me it seems not possible. So not to speak about the second jhana, but then you go to the third, fourth jhana, and some suttas, including this Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 64, and Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 52, the Buddha or Ananda speaks about going to the arupa jhanas, the formless meditative absorptions, which are in which the mind becomes extremely equanimous, perfectly still and silent. So it seems that in that state, I just would not see how it's possible to contemplate the factors within those states as being impermanent, suffering, non-self, while one is actually absorbed in them. But what makes better sense to me is that one emerges from the state and then one looks back at it reflexively and sees how the factors within that state were impermanent, dukkha, non-self. So that would be my understanding, that one doesn't contemplate with insight while absorbed in the attainment, but by emerging from it and in the afterglow of the attainment, while the mind is still imbued with that kind of calmness and purity, one then reflects back and examines the state.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. Can I ask one more question about the pure abodes?
Okay, if it's a quick and easy question, you could ask.
Yeah, it's actually related to the Sutta MN 140, Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta,
Yeah.
where Sati actually contemplates on the four elements.
Yeah.
So is that possible that one contemplate on the four elements and get to the pure abodes? Because in that sutta, it doesn't contemplate on the five aggregates. It contemplate only on the elements.
Well, actually, 6 elements are mentioned in that sutta.
Yes,
so it
6
includes
elements.
the space element and the conscious element. And then I take it that the four elements and the space element represent the aspect of material form, and the conscious element would include within it feeling, perception, volitional activities, as well as consciousness. So I would say that all five aggregates are actually implied there.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay, we come to An Fong.
Good evening, Bhante. Thank you.
Good morning. Okay.
Bhante, my question was when the sutta say the first jhana is volitionally produced, does that mean we can get into the first jhana just by desire to get to it?
Oh, no, it doesn't mean that just by desire alone one could get into it.
Oh.
But one has to have the volition. Of course, one has to have the desire to get into it. But then one has to volitionally cultivate the practices that will lead to the first jhana. So if one, say, uses mindfulness of breathing as a means for attaining the jhana, then one has to use the volition of keeping the mind on the breath until the Nimita appears, the sign of concentration. And then one has to volitionally keep the mind focused on the Nimita until one goes through the different stages and enters into the jhana. So it takes a lot of other factors, not just the desire, but one has to use the mindfulness, virya, energy, sampajanya, clear comprehension. The chaitana is the volition. The chanda is the desire. So, and then one has to undertake the practices. If just through the desire one could enter into the first jhana, then I would just have to sit back in my armchair and think, let me enter the first jhana, and I'm there. But it takes effort and diligence and practice.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, then we come to Ivan.
Oh, good morning, Bhante.
Good morning.
Bhante, so maybe with the Vipassana practice, in some of the sutta, there is mention of the 40 ways. So 20 related to dukkha, 5 with anatta, and 10
Yeah.
with anatta. How would Bante be so kind? How is this one in relations to the 11 angles in the Anguttara?
Yeah, I think the 40 ways, they call it 40, the Burmese call it the 40 toes, because you're thinking anicca toe, dukkha toe. I don't think one finds all of those ways in the suttas themselves, but I think they probably first appear maybe in Patisambhida Magga, which is the kind of analytical work included in the Sutta Pitaka, but it comes from maybe the 1st or 2nd century BC. So basically, all of those ways are just further elaborations of the 3 characteristics. They just use many more terms. And I think the Visuddhi Magga, if I remember, which also presents the 40 angles, then will explain how they can be comprised under the 3 main characteristics. I think it's in Visuddhi Magga chapter 20, probably. Okay. So I want to go now. Okay, I see one. Okay, I don't see any more questions because I want to take the next 2 suttas, which are, in a sense, they form part of the same set as the 2 we examined last week and just now, except now this is an interesting point. They use the same template, the same mold, except in place of the jhanas, they have the 4, what we usually call the 4 Brahmaviharas. So the word is not used here. So let's look at the sutta itself. So the first one is Anguttara Book of Force, number 125. The title is Loving Kindness, but we have all 4 of the immeasurable states. So we have a person who dwells pervading 1/4, that is 1/4 of the world, the north, east, south, and west, with a mind of loving kindness, then the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th. So east, west, north, and south, above, below, across, and everywhere, pervading the entire world with a mind of loving kindness. Vast, exalted, measureless, without enmity, without ill will. Okay, so that's the standard formula for the attainment of boundless loving kindness. Okay, now the text continues that one relishes it, desires it, and finds satisfaction in it. So this indicates that there's some element of attachment here, and that element of attachment is going to prevent the attainment of arhatship, because one is attached to this exalted attainment. But one is still firm in it, resolved in it, often dwells in it, and has not lost it when one dies. As I explained last week, this doesn't mean that you have to be actually absorbed in this attainment when you die. You might be a practitioner of this boundless loving kindness, but maybe one is going about one's everyday life, and then one gets a heart attack, or maybe one contracts cancer and one dies, while suffering the pain of the cancer. But one has been, through the course of one's life, regularly and consistently practicing this absorption based on loving kindness. It's not the case that one maybe developed the boundless loving kindness when one was a young person in one's 30s, then one got sort of swept away by worldly interests and neglect the practice until one dies at the age of 80 and one hasn't been practicing meditation from one's 40s to one's 80s. In that case, you could say that one has lost the attainment. And now what's not said, but what is interesting and important. Okay, first it said that this person is reborn in companionship with the devas of Brahma's company. Now, as we saw last week, this is a level of rebirth which corresponds to the first jhana. And so we could see, if we look at the note, that in this sutta, loving kindness is correlated with the first jhana, compassion with the second, altruistic joy with the third, and equanimity with the fourth jhana. So the sutta itself, what's interesting, doesn't say that the meditator attains any of the four jhanas, but because they are reborn into realms of existence that correspond to the four jhanas, we can infer that through the practice of these immeasurable states or Brahmaviharas, the meditator has attained a level of absorption that corresponds to the four jhanas. And in the suttas itself, in the suttas themselves, to my knowledge, it's never said that the four Brahmaviharas or the four immeasurables lead to the jhanas. In the suttas, the four jhanas are treated as one sequence of states, and the four Brahmaviharas or immeasurables is stated as a different group of meditative attainments. But I think it starts in the Abhidhamma with the Dhammasangani, and certainly in the commentaries, the connection is made that the Brahmaviharas are meditation subjects that can lead to the four jhanas. And in the developed Theravada scheme or system, the first three immeasurable states, it said, can lead to all three jhanas, the first, second, or third jhana, but not to the fourth, because these three meditations involve some level of sukha vedana, of pleasant feeling. And in the fourth jhana, pleasant feeling has given way to neutral feeling, the dukkha sukha vedana, to the feeling which is neither pleasant nor painful, also called equanimous feeling. And then it's said that the fourth Brahmavihara, or boundless equanimity, can lead on its own to the fourth jhana, because there's a correspondence between that feeling of neither pleasant nor painful feeling present in the fourth jhana and the meditative state of equanimity. Okay, so this meditator okay, and then it said that the worldling remains there all his or her life, and then having completed the lifespan in that realm, this practitioner can be reborn at some subsequent time, even in hell, the animal realm, or the sphere of afflicted spirits, while the Buddha's disciple remains there all their life, and then on completing the entire lifespan in that realm, they attain final nibbana in that very same state of existence. Actually, it would seem that they attain final nibbana in the course of the lifespan in that realm, so that they are not reborn elsewhere. But on completing, they attain enlightenment or arhatship during the course of the lifespan of those devas within that realm. And then on passing away within that state of existence, then they attain the final nibbana, the nibbana without any residue remaining. So that's the distinction, the disparity between the instructed noble disciple and the worldling. that is with regard to future destination and rebirth. And from this, we could see, important point, that even the non-Buddhist ascetics, who are considered still putujanas or worldlings, can also practice and attain the 4 Brahmaviharas. And in fact, we see in the suttas that during periods, cosmic periods, in which there's no Buddha or Buddha Dharma in the world, there are ascetics who go forth into the homeless life, the renunciate life, and they develop the 4 Brahmaviharas, and then they're reborn in the Brahma world. But and then even during the Buddha's own time, there were contemporary ascetics, who maybe followed other systems of philosophy, and they practiced meditation of the 4 Brahmaviharas and attained the absorptions through the Brahmaviharas, and then they were reborn in the different levels of the Brahma world. So what is distinctive of the Buddha's teaching, it's not the attainment of or the practice of the Brahmaviharas as such, but what we can see from the next sutta in this group is the use of the Brahmaviharas as a basis for developing insight, which is done in the same way as it's done with respect to the jhanas, that one enters into the particular Brahmavihara attainment, then one emerges and contemplates the factors there by way of the 5 aggregates: material, form, feeling, perception, volitions, and consciousness. And then one contemplates those factors in terms of the 11 angles. And then with the breakup of the body after death, if one has very sharp wisdom, then one can attain liberation or arhatship within the human realm based on that contemplation. But if one still has some subtle clinging to the experience, then one will be reborn in companionship with the devas of the pure abodes. Yeah, I just had taken some notes. Maybe I just will look through them quickly, and then we could take some questions. Yeah, what I found interesting, whenever we, contemporary Buddhist practitioners, speak about these 4 states, loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity, we always call them the 4 Brahmaviharas. But in the suttas, when the term Brahmavihara is used, it seems that it's always used with reference to the practitioners outside the Buddhist system who developed them for the purpose of taking rebirth in the Brahma world. So I collected some passages from the suttas, from Anguttara Nikaya Sutta number 17, which speaks about the king named Mahasudassana, who, having developed the 4 Brahmaviharas with the breakup of the body after death, was reborn in the Brahma world. Then another king named Magadeva also developed the Brahmaviharas and was reborn in the Brahma world. And here, some other practitioner, I don't remember who. So here is speaking about a Brahman who develops the 4 Brahmaviharas and then gets reborn in the Brahma world. In the sutta spoken by the Buddha, there's no collective name for these 4 sets, but in the last sutta of the Anguttara Nikaya, or maybe it's the next to the last sutta, Sariputta groups them together under the name, the 4 Upamanya, which means the 4 immeasurable states, the immeasurable states of mind, because each one has to be developed immeasurably towards all living beings. Okay, let us take some questions. And so I see Warna or Warna. You can unmute and lower the hand. You can go ahead and speak. Or maybe I don't see anyone. Okay, Diane.
Yeah, good morning, Bante.
Good morning.
It's just a short question. The Nimita is not a prerequisite for Janna, right, Bante?
This is a bit of a sort of controversial issue because the idea of using the Nimita as the object of Janna, one doesn't find very clearly stated in the suttas themselves. So this becomes part of the elaboration of the way, the means of practice in the Visuddhimagga and then in other commentaries, that as one goes on focusing on the object for developing samadhi, sometimes it's a bright light, or it looks like maybe the disk of the moon, or a conch shell, or a ball of cotton wool appears, and then one focuses upon the nimitta, and then the mind gains absorption in the nimitta. We don't find that explicitly stated in the suttas.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay. Julian? Again,
Yeah,
on
Bante, yep. Just now you're saying that the commentary says that when the devas pass away, they get reborn as human beings.
Yeah.
Whereas this sutta says that, when deva pass away, they're reborn in hell. I think in this Satya Samyutta 56, I think 108,
Yeah.
he says here that few beings, when they pass away as devas, are reborn among the devas. But those beings are more numerous, who when they pass away as devas, are reborn in hell, animal realm, and in the domain of ghosts.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's no stipulation that they have to be reborn as human beings first, which is different from what the commentary says, right?
Yeah, but first of all, the suttas that we've been looking at in the Anguttara Nikaya are speaking not simply about rebirth as devas, but rebirth as devas in the form realm. So there are sense sphere devas who may be from devas in the sense sphere can pass away. Let me just get the map of the realms of existence. So we have in the sensual blissful plane, we have 6 deva worlds. And perhaps it's possible for the devas in these sense sphere heavens to pass away from there and then to take rebirth in the lower realms. But what's said in the sutta, or the suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya, are speaking about beings reborn as devas in the form realm. And so the Abhidharma says that when the devas in the form realm pass away, they don't take rebirth. They can't take rebirth in the 3 lower planes, but have to come back. Maybe they can take rebirth as devas in the sense sphere plane or as human beings. And then passing away from there, they can take rebirth in the 3 realms of misery. And that makes sense to me, because it seems like too big a jump from the form realm down to the realms of intense suffering.
Thank you, Bante.
Okay, that was Julian, right?
Yes.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, it seems there's no other questions. And so then we'll end the program for today. And I just want to make a few announcements. First, to learn about the regular BOWS activities, if you're not aware of them, you can go to the BOWS website. That's the Buddhist Association of the United States. Regularly on Sunday evening, Venerable Mangala will conduct an evening group meditation, 7 to 8 p.m. with a supplementary question and answer period from 8 to 8:30 p.m. Then Wednesday evenings, I lead the group meditation from 7 to 8 p.m. And anything else coming up? Yeah, this is not from BOWS, but this is from my other organization, Buddhist Global Relief. This is the kind of save the date announcement. On the weekend, the Memorial Day weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, that's May 29th, 30th, 31st, we'll be having a 3-day retreat on the 4 Brahmaviharas, the 4 immeasurable minds. So please, the announcement will come up soon on the Buddhist Global Relief website. Maybe it's there already. Is Kim here?
Bante, it's already there.
It's already there. Yeah,
Yep.
so you could save the date, and I think a registration form might be there. So I'll be teaching that together with the Bhikkhuni Ayadhamadipa from Aloka Vihara and Venerable Jin Chun.
Read the first line, the very first line.
Excuse me? Okay, yeah, so please reserve those dates. Okay, so we're going to end now with the sharing of the merits. So I'll recite the verses for the sharing of the merits. And so you direct your mind with loving kindness towards all sentient beings. And again, let's focus specifically on Burma or Myanmar, which is really tragic what is taking place there. Soldiers just going into homes and shooting people who are suspected of being protesters, even killing children and babies. Burma is a country that has preserved Buddhism for many centuries. So let's share the merit. Akasata Chabumata Deva Nagam Hidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirangra Kantu Sasanam. Akasata Chabumata Deva Nagam Hidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirangra Kantu Desanam. Akasata Chabumata Deva Nagam Hidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang Imina Punyakame Bhavagupadaya Vichi Hetato Etantare Satakayu Papana Rupia Rupicha Sanya Sanino Dukha Pamuchantu Kusantu Nibuting Dukha Patachani Dukha Baya Patachani Baya Soka Patachani Soka Antu Sabepi Panino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. We go sadhu, sadhu,
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And then
And a sadhu to Bante as well.
Yeah, and then we bow 3 times to the Buddha.
Sadhu.
1 time, 2nd, and then 3rd time. Okay, so thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you,
Okay, thank you
Bante.
for joining.
Everyone.
Thank you, Bante.
Thank you, Bante. Good health to you, Bante.
Okay, thank
Thank you,
you.
Bante.
Thank you,
Sadhu.
Bante. Be well.
Okay, thank you.
Be healthy. Everyone have a good weekend.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Sadhu,
Okay.
sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, I'm going to shut off now.
Love you, Bhante.
Okay, thank you.